You are now part of a social experiment.
See now where my limit is. Only got no ohs.
A good starting ground is the history component when it comes to children because if I know that math is a source that comes from me, I may just be more interested in it. And I know you've looked into this with kids, so can you share just exactly some of the history of math and what kids have kind of said or shared with you when you have told them about the history and they've realized the connections?
Were overwhelming. Students and adults alike had no clue. And so when you think about the quote unquote origins of mathematics, just naturally thinking if mankind started in Africa, that we would know that mathematics started in Africa, but we equate it to the Greeks and Romans. And so more than 40,000 years ago, in a region called Lebombo in the Lebombo Mountains, which are on the border of South Africa and what was Swaziland, there was an artifact called, and it's called the Lebombo bone, that showed markings on it. And what is believed is that Black women were the first to start thinking about numbers in that way to track their cycle against the lunar calendar. Then, 15,000 years after that, so about 25,000 years ago, in the Congo region, you find what is known as the Ishango bone. And on the Ishango bone, you have these markings, and now they are categorized where they're dealing with multiples of threes, fours, 12s. Looks like what are some prime numbers. Part of it is cut off. And you see that the mathematics is developing. You can branch off and go to the East Coast in Kenya. You can go to the West Coast in West Africa with the Dogon people. And when you get north, Black people just lost their mind in what is known today as Egypt, but they called it Kemet, land of the Blacks. This is when you get the building of the pyramids. You get the Temple of Dendera with the calendar. Think about if you're first, we don't have all this social media. You don't have TV. You don't have any of this. The stars is your entertainment. Think about how many years, if you get 365 days in a year, think about how many 365 days you have to watch to start picking up the patterns and knowing when seasons are going to change, knowing when there's going to be a drought. And so Black people were studying this for hundreds, thousands of years and documenting it. And there are different papyri that we have that's named now after the white people that stole it. You have the Moscow papyrus, you have the Berlin papyrus, you have all of these different papyrus that document what these Black people were doing. And so the the Greeks and the Romans, they came to Egypt as students. And they say that. Herodotus came, Pythagoras, the so-called Pythagoras theorem, he didn't create that. He learned that because he was studying in Egypt for over 20 years. You can find evidence of the use of the so-called Pythagorean theorem if you go to the king's chamber inside, the three pyramids, Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, those three pyramids you see all the time out of Egypt. There's evidence of that relationship being used in ancient Egypt.
That is fascinating. So when you tell the kids this, like, what is their response? Even the adults?
Yeah, I mean, it's a gradual thing. And so basically, whenever I'm introducing something, I'll introduce it. Then I may introduce other mathematicians, those that we're more familiar with, like Katherine Johnson. I may tell them about Robert Fuller, who came over as an enslaved African. He was known as the human calculator, could do all of these calculations in his head. Of course, the white colonizers were amazed by that. So I introduce it because, it's like giving people dosage. You got to let it get into their system, right? And what it does is that it builds confidence. Think about if there were 100 of us to take a selfie. If we were to take a selfie, who's the first person you're going to look at when you look at the picture? Who's the first person you're going to look for?
Yourself.
Yourself. So think
Mhm.
about when children are looking at all of this stuff that they're learning, they're looking for people that look like them.
And in the classroom, they're not gonna find it.
And they're not seeing shit. So then now you have to think about what are they internalizing about what they think about Black people. This is why you have children as young as in 3rd grade and 4th grade saying things like you talking white or you think you so. This is why because they don't see it. So it ain't that someone is directly saying that Black people don't know anything. Indirectly, they're not seeing it.
we started speaking, I was telling you that I was actually looking for somebody with a math mind to speak with because, as you know, Terrence Howard has been talking about just math and new ways of thinking about it. And he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I'm like, to me, I'm like, I'm not a math savant. So when he's like one times one is actually two, I'm like, hmm, like, it's a language that, a lot of people I think that don't really understand math or study math, they're gonna consider what he's saying, especially the confidence that he's saying it with. So when he's like, "There's no zero," and so some people think he's a genius, some people think he's out of his mind. So I wanted to just get your opinion, not if he's a genius or out of his mind, but just the concept that he's talking about with one times one and that zero concept. What your thoughts are about that?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to mathematics, he's definitely out of his mind. So clear on that. Uh, so I'm saying that as a mathematician, right? I studied mathematics at Michigan State University. And so just the fundamental things that he spoke of with one times one equaling two, because his thing is he did this thing with a dollar, right? He said if you have
Mhm,
$1, he put $2, right? But that's like saying a TV times a TV. Does
mhm,
that make sense mathematically? No, because if you show one TV and another TV, you have two TVs. And what you've in essence has done is add one TV to another TV. So
mhm,
you don't multiply an object times another object. You can multiply what's called a scalar quantity. I can say 3 times TV, 3 TVs, right? And so even if we just go back to the one times one, that's in essence saying you have one one. If you do
mhm,
two times three, that means you have two threes. Okay. Three plus three is six. But if you have one one, you just have one. And so then he said, well, think about the definition of what it means to multiply. That means to make larger. That's not the case, not in mathematics, in everyday
mhm,
language. And so
mhm,
the other thing is that when people aren't paying attention, you also have to pay attention to words because words have different meanings, right? I can think about set. I can say I represent the hood set. I can say I represent the Crips. That's my set, right? That's talking about a game. I can talk about a set of numbers. I can talk about having a set as a party. So the multiply that we're talking about in mathematics, it does not mean to make larger. It means to take a set number, a set quantity, a certain amount of times. The easiest way to think about it is if you have point 0.5 times 1, 5/10 times 1, it does not make one larger. In fact, a half of one is a half, right? And so his premise as it relates to just the understanding of language as well as the language of mathematics was completely flawed. And then this so-called scientist that he mentioned was actually an artist that was treated for mental issues back, I don't know, 50, 75 years or whatever it was. And so when he first not when he first made these statements, because when he first made these statements, they didn't get a lot of play, so I didn't pay attention to it. What concerned me was that when people really started saying, "Oh, he's onto something," that that is fearful, and it speaks to the importance of the work that both you and I do as it relates to education. And so once he did that, I said, "Let me watch this foolishness." Because you don't want to argue with something you haven't even watched the whole thing. So I sat through that whole thing, taking pages of notes and just, using actual facts to say that this was incorrect. And then on my TikTok, I think I went through and proved in like 7 different ways, from basic arithmetic to calculus that 1 times 1 is 1.
mm. Yeah, it's so interesting because I don't think that we are in an age now where we know how to verify information. So it's like when people get new information, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, this sounds interesting. To me, I'm like, wait, Terrence Howard's an actor. Like, where's he getting all this stuff from? So
We
to
don't
me, I
have
always
that
wanted.
intellect anymore. When Neil deGrasse Tyson, when he commented on it, it was like, okay, this is bonkers. People are like, he just trying to, like, we don't even respect people that have gone and studied this stuff in theory for years by getting educated in it, however you view education, and then in practice. I've been teaching mathematics for the past 31 years now. I think I know more about mathematics than Terrence Howard.
I would agree with that. Now, the zero really had me thinking though. I'm not gonna lie. The zero had me thinking. So he was saying, there's really no such thing as zero, and there's no.
Well, let's do it.
Mhm,
You have $100 in your bank account, right?
mhm,
If I take it all, what do you have left?
nothing.
There's zero.
Yeah.
And in ancient Egypt, they called it uh new. In the beginning, there was nothing. Okay. And it was
Mhm,
new. So this concept of zero, of nothingness, has always been around, rather in the spiritual realm, in the Whitney Houston understood it. She said, I have nothing. She was at zero. You understand it when it comes to money, right?
mhm,
You have no
mm,
money, you have zero. If you have money, you have a positive amount. If you not only have no money in your pocket or in your bank account, and you also owe people, now you're at negative.
hmm. See, this is why we need math educators, man. This is important, man. I'm glad you clarified that for us. If anybody was guessing about Terrence Howard, hopefully that kind of makes some sense in regards to what the math is behind that. Because we a lot of us already low in math, so it's like we're like, oh well, this might make a little sense. So
Right, right. Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to clarify that for us.
So every day I'm going hard. I'm talking business, bank accounts, and credit cards. And somehow we defeat the odds and making sure that no one starve illegal. All you had to